Penn State Football Tailgate Show on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and simulcast on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Now, here's Thomas Frank Carr and Landon Tengwall.
It's finally here. The biggest game of October, the second biggest game of the 2024 season. The Nittany Lions travel out west in the new Big Ten to face the fabled USC Trojans football program, one of the most iconic brands in all of college football. But USC is 3-2 and unranked after going 1-2 to start the Big Ten season. Penn State coming in a top 5 team in the nation. Landon Tengwall, former Penn State offensive lineman, host of Behind the Wall podcast, is here. We're talking about the game today. Feels a little different than it did to start the season, Landon.
It does, man. I think coming into today, obviously, USC, we said Illinois was a test. I think this is the first true test for Penn State headed on the road. So you add another kind of a piece of that adversity you have to face. I think we learned a lot about this team early on against West Virginia. So I did like to see that. We obviously had a rain delay there. It was away. It was in a really tough environment. And really everybody answered the call. Now you're coming into a game against USC. And I thought this the other day. Penn State is almost in a lose-lose situation right now.
Right.
If you win the game, if you're Penn State, okay, you were number 4, they're unranked, you were supposed to win. I don't even, some people are saying, I don't know if you count that as a signature win for Penn State if USC has continued to be unranked. Now, on the flip side, if Penn State loses to a good USC team, I think this is still a good team that is very explosive. So anytime you're playing an explosive team across the country on their side, it's always going to be a tough matchup. So I'm definitely curious to see how they go about that. But it's going to be a fun day nonetheless to watch Penn State take on USC and obviously travel over to the West Coast. Have not been there since the Rose Bowl in 2022. And hopefully Penn State's creating a little more of that Rose Bowl magic we had.
We are not in Los Angeles, as you might imagine, but we are in the best possible place that we could be. We are at the Field Burger and Tap at Toftrees. Thank you to them for being such gracious hosts for us on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We're going to talk about this matchup coming up over the next 90 minutes, whether it is the offense, the defense, the travel, all of the things that go into it, the airport, the length of the runway. We're going to be talking about all the things that happened this week in Penn State football, including a Penn State practice report coming up in just a few minutes. But I do want to ask you about maybe some of the real, how it actually affects a football player to travel, be in a different time zone, and still have to perform your best. Because I'll tell you, I've traveled before, and my in-laws out on the West Coast, when I go to see them, they know, the first day, don't try and hang out with me because I'm asleep at 8 o'clock. So for a football player who's got to get up and get ready to play a game, how does this actually affect you?
Let's talk about a couple things. To start out, the guys got there Thursday. As we know, everybody's been talking about it. Real quick fun fact, Ohio State got to Eugene, Oregon on Friday. They did not leave a day early.
Oh.
Something to kind of talk about there.
Yeah.
But as far as the logistics of the travel, the guys got their day early, and then they got to go out, and a lot of guys were posting on Thursday. They basically got to travel around L.A. And do some cool stuff. So that is, I guess it's an extra component of you're doing stuff, you're out, you're as much as, and I think Franklin encourages that. He always has with bowl travel, but it's a little bit different when you're only out there for 2 or 3 days.
Right.
And, you want some guys to experience some cool stuff, but at the same time, on a normal Thursday, instead of walking around LA doing all this stuff, you would normally go back to your apartment and chill out and watch some film. So I think there's a little piece of that where it's like you always want to give the guys a cool piece of the environment that you're in, but you also need to balance that a little bit. And then talking about the actual logistics, it does come into play because no matter what, when you go across country and you're changing 3 hours, when it's bedtime and they say, hey, you need to get to bed 10:30, 11, I'm already, I guess if they're coming West Coast, I'm already way tired. I'm tired at 8. Then I'm waking up early. I'm waking up at 3 a.m. It's like, dude, what is going on?
Yeah.
And it just completely messes with your sleep cycle. So I do think that's something that definitely matters. But at the end of the day, when you get there and you get on the field, you play a football game. I do wholeheartedly believe that. I think there are some factors that can just make things a little more difficult.
Yeah.
But I will say this, there are all the excuses in the world today to start slow. I'm just going to be honest.
Boy.
I'm just putting that out there. I don't want us to, of course, but I'm just saying it seems like it's there for the taking almost.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of been the question for a while about Penn State going back to even 2016. It's,
Yeah. So part of that I've been curious about this week is, even I think for a lot of us to get ready for the game, to cover the game, or to, watching the game, you show up and that's your Saturday, you've planned all around it. But in order to prepare for some of these games, some of the things you need to do, I can't imagine losing a full day. So Thursday, you're traveling, you get to Los Angeles, you do gain 3 hours, but at the same time, for a football team, and I don't know, I know you never had to do this during a regular season, but that amount of preparation, if you just had to lose a day of preparation, how much does that affect your readiness to start fast or to just have the best possible game plan to go up against a team that we mentioned? Maybe they're 3-2, but they are a dangerous 3-2.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when you are off the normal schedule, whether you're home or away, you're used to that Thursday night being the same thing. You have that slow walk through. Then you go home. That's the night you get home the earliest by far. You get home by 5:30, 6 p.m., and you kind of just get to chill. Some guys will just get together, hang out, watch some film. And like I said, that all goes out the window. Your routine Friday morning goes out the window. It's completely changed. So I think for some guys, it's a matter of, can you kind of resist that and lock back in and push out the outside noise? And I think it gets hard, like I said, when the guys have the opportunity on Thursday to go do whatever they want, walk around, because they already got the practice out of the way Thursday morning. So they got, they went to Harrisburg, they drove to Harrisburg, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit, and then flew out from Harrisburg to California.
Yeah.
And you get out there, then you're 3 hours behind, so it's essentially only really a 2-hour flight as far as the time goes.
Gotcha.
You have the whole afternoon to do whatever you want. So I'm sure the coaches, kind of reeled that in a little bit, but you also want to, like I said, Franklin is really big on giving his players experiences, and there's a lot of guys that haven't been to California ever in their life, so planning a couple things like that to go out with the team, enjoy some food, the culture, is definitely something that Penn State did and Franklin put an emphasis on.
We're going to talk about the specific matchups and the specific who's going to be a big factor in this game in the next couple segments. But I just want to get a high-level view, and I know you gave a little bit of it earlier, but this USC team and how Penn State matches up with them, from what I've seen from a basic level of Penn State likes to do this, USC does this, there are some pain points, I think, for Penn State in this game from these two teams don't match up perfectly, maybe the way I think in Illinois, Penn State match up with them pretty well. How do you see this matchup this week?
Yeah, I think one of the big things starting off is we have not seen an offense even close to this explosive. They also spread you out. They go a lot of 10 personnel, meaning they have one running back, 0 tight ends, and 3 or 4 wide receivers out there. So their goal is to spread you out and pass the ball. Miller Moss threw the ball 51 times against Michigan. Expect more of that today. Now, where I get a little bit nervous with that is think about the last teams that kind of fit that category that I just described. Ole Miss, spread you out, throw the ball.
Yep.
Obviously, need some context there. We were missing a lot of our starters at the time, but that was still an offense that shredded us. Ohio State, anytime when they spread it out, they don't always do it. Sometimes they'll run the ball and get in some 2 tight end sets, but they spread it out. And when they have playmakers, it has shown that we have struggled with that in the past. So I'm worried we're kind of back where we're at, where we have a really creative offensive coordinator. Well, he's not the offensive coordinator, but the play caller in Lincoln Riley.
Yep.
And then a lot of weapons. And I wouldn't say, talking also about their run game and just offense as a whole, their run game, it's very explosive. It's not consistent, but Woody Marks, their running back for USC, he can hit one, and he's a fast running back. So
explosive,
do not let
physical.
him get to that second level and have to be in a foot race with Woody Marks. That is not a world you want to live in if you're Penn State.
We are here at the Field Burger and Tap live on 99.5 The Bus and also on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. So if you want to check out any of the things we do at Blue White Illustrated, the easiest way to get into what we do at Blue White Illustrated to get some of the in-depth industry-leading reporting from Blue White Illustrated is join our YouTube channel. Totally free. You can subscribe. But if you're interested, in honor of the big game right now, we have a promo, 50% off the annual price at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for an entire year, $60 to get in and get information like what was going on with Nick Singleton last week. We were the first on that conversation about Nick Singleton and his availability for last week. Of course, our reporters were at the stadium, giving you updates pregame on the Blue White Illustrated message board. So that's just one example of the reporting that we do. My film analysis over on the site as well. Sign up now, 50% off if you're interested in getting more in-depth on Penn State football, which is what we're going to do next. But before that, we have the Penn State practice update. What happened this week with the Nittany Lions? Was Nick Singleton at practice? Who else was out there? We got that update for you right now on the Tailgate Show. We'll be back with more on the Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships Tailgate Show 2024. So, Fitz, what did you see with the defense yesterday?
I'm going to set up like a lounge chair on the defensive field next time.
It's time for your weekly Penn State practice update. I'm Thomas Frank Carr from Blue White Illustrated. There's good news for Nittany Lions fans on the offense, which we'll get to in just 1 second. But if you want this information when it first comes out, join Blue White Illustrated right now for 50% off the annual subscription price with the promo code WEARE at checkout. That way you get access to practice notes, reports, and more on Wednesday night. Let's start with the news that fans are turning out to find out. Both Nick Singleton and Anthony Donko were present and going through drills during the early portion of practice Wednesday afternoon. We'll get to Donko in one moment, but the situation with Singleton looked favorable. The Nittany Lions running back was going through drills with his teammates and had no visible alterations to his movements. The sentiment around the program is that Singleton is fine and will be available for this weekend. The status with Donko is slightly less clear and maybe less rosy than the team's tailback. The offensive line shuffled the lineup at right tackle on Wednesday. Top reserve Nolan Rucci was the first player through, followed by the team's top reserve offensive lineman overall, J.B. Nelson. Nelson took a few reps extra at the second team tackle position, presumably to get more comfortable with the position. Head coach James Franklin was vague but positive with his report about the team's starting right tackle.
Obviously you guys know we've been very, very pleased with Anthony, and we anticipate having him on Saturday. Rucci has been able to play and play well, allow us to continue to do what we want to do on offense.
While this seems like obnoxious semantics, and it probably is, having him on Saturday doesn't mean playing him on Saturday. Donko, as we talked about, was the third man through the rotation and took a noticeably smaller amount of reps than his teammates. However, he was active and present throughout the entire time we were there, going through various blocking drills. As always, the best way to know before game day is to check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com to get updates on availability pregame. Join the pregame thread on the message board to find out what our reporters at the stadium see in pregame warm-ups. We'll be back with more from the Tailgate Show next. So, Fitz, what did you see with the defense yesterday?
I'm going to set up like a lounge chair on the defensive field next time and just sit there and observe, because there's really not much to take in. I mean, it's really business as usual for Penn State's defense. Now, there are a couple things that we picked up, and observations were up last night on the site. But in terms of personnel, I think the biggest question people had was Kobe King, because you've seen limited reps from him the last couple of games. I think you can explain that one away in the Kent State game, taking that hit early. But Tyler Elston got a lot of reps late last week. I think that's by design. I'm fairly certain that's by design. Kobe's been out there every week, leading the team through drills, leading the linebacker group through drills, and I don't think there's any question who the leader of that group is, and I think he's going to be very big this week. So I think that rep count jumps significantly. I think Penn State was doing it to get more experience for those guys behind him. We saw a lot of Tamir Robinson last week. We keep seeing more of Dakari Nelson. And again, mentioned Elston there as well. But Penn State seems to be rounding back into form from a health perspective from the guys that we expect. There are still guys that are certainly out on the defensive side of the ball on both sides of the ball. But, from guys that are, I guess we would consider that short-term injuries, they look pretty good right now. So it seems good. Other than that, I mean, you're looking at a defensive line that has a real opportunity to dictate this week. And I think that has been hammered home. Deion Barnes and Torrance Brown doing a really good job with those guys, pulled Xavier Gilliam up to the travel squad this week. So that's cool. But a lot of what I saw, it was very interesting when you take that and sort of juxtapose that into what USC does, and based on what we think USC is going to do based on Illinois, UCLA, those game tapes that may have exposed some flaws at Penn State's defensive plans up front. I think you mentioned it on Tuesday. Lincoln Riley, despite all the thoughts that you may have in your head, wants to run the football. And I think that if they're going to be able to do that, and I don't think they're very good up front, but if they're going to be able to do that, it's going to be in the screen and draw, or in the draw game specifically with the runs. So I think they did some drills this week, sort of hammer home, emphasize, shedding that block, keeping your head up, and then going after the ball carrier. Because, when you're in a situation when you're ahead, like they were against USC this week, you're thinking pass rush. I mean, that's the old ears pinned back thing, pass rush gets the quarterback, but that's when you get caught. So I think that there's been more of an emphasis on that. And I'll be curious to see how that draw game works, because I think if USC is going to run the football, I think that's the way you're going to try it.
Yeah, and it's also running from spread formation. There's just more room. You don't have as many bodies to kind of clog things up and make the other team, or just generally have mistakes and chaos happen. So you have to be on your details about your gap assignment and not overrunning a play or trying to run around a block, because the moment you do that, the help is now farther away. So I think those things too, kind of similar to the Illinois game, you have to be on those details. The difference here is that USC likes to throw the football and is more willing to do more things with the football through the air than Illinois, which was run the ball, and then we'll throw some RPOs off of running the football, but really we're going to run the football. So I think that you're right, that the space is more important this week than it has been in previous weeks.
Tengwall, as he gives you the key matchups. Brought to you by Stalker Chevrolet. For your next vehicle purchase, come to Stalker Chevrolet and save with low interest rates. And remember, only at Stalker Chevrolet will you get the Stalker Advantage with the purchase of any new vehicle.
Welcome back into the Penn State Tailgate show, excuse me.
You do too many of these.
I do too many. I do so many radio. Sorry, I tried to get it right. I don't ever bring us in too often, T. Frank. But forget about all that, guys. We are going to give you the key matchup of the game. And the key matchup for me is USC's quarterback, Miller Moss, versus Penn State's secondary. And I say that because USC is a pass-heavy offense. In the past 3 games, they've passed 134 times. Headlined by 51 passes against Michigan, which I think is a very similar defense to Penn State. So I think we're going to see a similar blueprint from Lincoln Riley and Miller Moss. So this Penn State secondary hasn't really played an offense that wants to sling it like this. So they are going to be tested for the first time this year. Let's see how they respond. And I think this Penn State secondary has been headlined by transfer A.J. Harris, who is really only in his second year, and he has done some really impressive stuff to start the year off. Franklin has rotated the cornerbacks all around, so that is something to keep an eye on and who's going to start the game. But the way A.J. Harris has been playing up to this point, I'd have to assume he's going to be a starter and is going to be a big-time contributor against USC today.
I know you said this earlier this week. This is somebody you think might be the best transfer that Penn State's gotten so far under James Franklin during the transfer portal era?
I rethought that conversation. Well, first I said outside of Chop Robinson.
You did.
And then in the comments, I mentioned Arnold Ebiketie, who was here for my first year. And so I was like, that was a really good one too. But then I kind of forgot about Jaquan Brisker and Jair Brown. But that doesn't count.
There's a long list.
There's a really long list.
Yeah.
I was more thinking like NIL era-ish, like 2021 and on transfer portal, because it's a whole different world now. And those 2 guys came from Lackawanna College, so I won't count that all the way. I do think, in my opinion, I would have to go Jaquan Brisker, I think. Probably the best overall transfer.
But the story is not written yet for A.J. Harris completely. And I think that's the really exciting thing. And this is what everybody loves, is the unknown, the potential of the positive. And A.J. Harris is off to a very fast start. Somebody who came in, and a lot of times, Chop Robinson didn't start right away. Jaquan Brisker rotated in. Tig Brown rotated in. I don't think we've seen since probably Arnold Ebiketie, we haven't seen a transfer come in and immediately start and make an impact like this. And it's not just him, Jalen Kimber on the other side as well. And that's, to me, the interesting thing about this matchup is I think Penn State's outside corners can go toe-to-toe with USC's wide receivers. To me, the biggest matchup in that matchup together between the two is the slot and Zachariah Branch in the slot. Penn State has been working through their what I call the 11th defender, whether it's a corner, linebacker, safety, however you want to split that pie. That player today is the focal point in my mind. Who do you think that's going to be, and how do you think that matchup goes, either in Penn State's favor or USC's favor?
Yeah, I think there's a couple guys that you could see in that role. Obviously, Cam Miller, someone that has played there a lot. We talked about Jalen Reed in that lion position, which, as you said, it's a kind of a hybrid between a safety linebacker, and you find them in the slot position. So I think you see a mixture of those two. And another thing that I think you're going to see is USC try to get the ball out quick. So you have to be on top of these wide receivers if you are this Penn State defense. That is how I see it. I think Miller Moss, I believe he is third in the Big Ten in getting the ball out, meaning that he catches and he throws 2.4 seconds. That's very quick. And what they are trying to do is take the Penn State defensive line out of the game. So that's something to keep an eye on as well, heading into what is going to be probably 50-plus passes possibly for Miller Moss in this game.
Yeah, I want to bring up something that I think is very interesting about what you said, that USC wants to throw the football, and it leads into that conversation about getting the ball out quickly, and I think some of the screens, because there's two prongs of this kind of thought in my mind. First off, Penn State fans are saying that they throw a lot of screens, and USC is going to attack Penn State with screens. I think that's fair. But when we talk about Miller Moss, he's thrown the ball 202 times so far this season. You rewind back to Spencer Rattler at Oklahoma in 2020, and he threw the ball 317 times. If you look at Jalen Hurts, he threw the ball 341 times in a full season. So I don't know that this is exactly what Lincoln Riley wants. They are running this offense because they have to with some of their personnel deficiencies. So I guess in that context, when it comes to the screen game, how vulnerable is Penn State, and how much can they wallpaper over their issues with the offensive line and pass protection to attack Penn State?
Yeah, I think obviously you have to be disciplined if you're that Penn State defense. Stay in your zone, stay in your area, and do your responsibility. Now, like you said, the reason why USC is so pass-heavy, their offensive line, it's young and it's not very good. They have a left tackle that's only in his second year, and he should not be playing yet, and he flashes on film. He does a really good job sometimes, and then at other points, it's like, wow, that's scary. Miller Moss might get killed.
Right.
And you kind of see that as well in the run game. It's like it just doesn't materialize for USC for a while. But I mentioned earlier, you have to be very careful because USC has Woody Marks back there, number 4, their tailback.
Yeah.
He can break one off. He broke off a big one, I believe against Michigan earlier this year, and he has the ability to gash you, but you can't let him get going. So I think that also a big piece of today is the linebackers. Not only talking a little bit of run game, but like I said, we're going to pass it. In the past, Penn State linebackers, you're not really built to be spread out in a spread offense and just be attacked over the middle. That's not where Kobe King's strong suit is.
Right.
So maybe you don't see as much of Kobe King. Like, you kind of maybe, you're in a little bit lighter looks, that type of thing. And you're almost a third down look for more of the game. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we could see from the Penn State defense today.
It's something that I've been very fascinated in this particular matchup. I do want to get to the defensive line and the front seven and some of those conversations here in a second, but kind of to wrap up the thing that I'm looking for in this particular game. The number one thing is, how do they defend the passing attack from a schematic standpoint, from a personnel standpoint, number one, and then number two, a schematic standpoint, because Penn State likes to play man coverage. James Franklin talked about before the season, he wanted to be a man coverage team. They have done that, and they have been very good at times at completely shutting down the opposing offense. But the opposing offense didn't have Miller Moss. They didn't have Zachariah Branch. When this offense, USC, has gotten man coverage looked, one-on-one, single coverage, they are unbelievably lethal. They have gone against 3 teams so far. They've gone against 4 Power 4 teams so far. 2 of them have played zone. They've lost both of those games, and they've won the other ones where they played their opponent played man coverage. Do you think Penn State has enough in its system to adapt and bring that back and maybe find that blueprint?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Tom Allen, he's a veteran coach that has been doing this for a long time, so he understands what you need to do. I mean, obviously, if T. Frank's able to dissect it, I think Tom Allen can figure that out as well, so it's not like Tom Allen doesn't know that. Now, I mean, the question is, like you said, do you have the personnel to do it? Are you trusting Cam Miller and these guys in man coverage against a Zachariah Branch? And just to give you guys an idea of what type of athlete their slot wide receiver Zachariah Branch is, he was pretty much the consensus best punt returner in all of college football last year as a true freshman.
Yeah.
when that label is on you, you are incredibly dynamic. Like I said, and I didn't really even talk about it in the return game. He can also break open a game. If you're starting to give the offense the ball with really good field position, that can definitely hurt you a little bit. So as a whole, I think these playmakers for USC are something that we're pretty much really only used to seeing once a year in Ohio State. And now it's like, okay, this is what we're getting. I think Miller Moss is a very, very talented quarterback, but he is stifled a little bit by a bad offensive line. But give him, this Penn State defensive line needs to make him get the ball out quick. And like I said, you're going to see some quick wide receiver screens, dump off to the running backs, and overall just kind of quick throws trying to help out Miller Moss not get killed back there.
So that brings up the conversation, and this is what Blue Man 25 on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel is. Obviously, we don't have a way to talk to everybody on the bus or in the other various places you might be listening to, but if you're hopping on the YouTube channel, you can leave a comment. He donates to the channel, so I always appreciate people doing that. He says, I think the best chance to get a win out in LA is to get to Miller Moss. DB's got to give the D-line time, and the offense has to play bully ball. So in that context of the defensive line and getting to the quarterback, how does Penn State make sure their advantage is actually an advantage given everything we just talked about with what USC is probably going to try and do in this game?
Yeah, I'd say you don't need to blitz too much. I think you have a front four that can get pressure against their five. So I think you take advantage of that and you play a lot of coverage. Like I said, be mindful that they're going to try to get the ball out quickly. I think you trust denied Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter and Zane Duran, especially as of recent. They're going to get home when USC wants to pass the ball. Now, talking about pass protection for USC, when they played Minnesota last week, they were up 17-7. They were on Minnesota's 40-yard line driving, getting ready to put the game away with 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Pressure comes off the edge from USC's right tackle. Miller Moss gets hit as he throws, and then Minnesota picks the ball off. That completely changes it. Minnesota went down, scored a touchdown. The rest is history. You know what happened. So right there, that shows me, USC pretty much lost the game because of their offensive line last week. Now, on top of that, overall as a whole, USC has turned the ball over a lot, 6 times in the last 2 games. That is a lot of turnovers, and 2 of those 6 are pretty much directly because Miller Moss was getting shellacked in the backfield because his offensive line couldn't block.
Sacks don't tell the whole story. Something that I talked about earlier this week on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. He's been sacked 3 times from those tackles, pressure coming off the edges. He's gotten hit 13 times. And some of those are resulting in fumbles and interceptions and bad plays. So even if Penn State comes out of this and they have 1 sack in the game, but they get 2 turnovers based off that pressure, that's a win, right, for the defense.
Yep. I definitely think so. And that is the biggest thing. You see a lot of pressures, maybe not as many sacks, because like I said, Lincoln Riley knows that his offensive line is dog poop, and that they are going to get home on them. So it's like, hey, there's a lot of pressures. There's not a lot of sacks for that reason. I will tell you this. I say I'm giving a lot of stats from the last 2-3 games, because 3 games ago they really started Big Ten play, where they went Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, now us. They're getting the gauntlet, USC is. In those past 3 games, they've given up 6 sacks, 2 of those fumbles. In those 3 games, 46 pressures, T-Frank. That is a lot of pressure on Miller Moss. And in comparison, like I said, Drew Aller all year only pressured 32 times. To just give you an idea of how much pressure is being put on Miller Moss compared to other pretty good Penn State offensive line.
And it's because they probably can't run the ball, and they can't run the way they want to run the ball a lot of different ways because of some of those deficiencies up front. So let's take a look at that. We haven't talked about the run game yet, which I know you're probably itching to talk about the offensive line and the defensive line and the defensive tackles and all those situations. But with a coverage-first perspective in this game, which is, I guess, how I'm coming into this game, do you have to cede some ground to USC in order to stop the pass? And then if they get 6 yards on a run, okay, but they didn't get 16 yards on a pass. Is that a acceptable trade in this game? Or if you're Penn State, do you feel like you can take it all away? You can take away the run, you can take away the pass, and force them into a no-win situation?
I do think you're able to take away most of their offense if you are able to make them one-dimensional, which they kind of naturally are with how much they pass, but they will mix in, and what they love to do in the run game is run gap scheme. And gap scheme is when you're pulling 1 or 2 of those big dudes. They love to skip pull their tackle around, and they love to pull that guard and tight end backside, and they want to get big men in motion, moving them around, hitting guys, creating gaps, because Woody Marks, the running back, as I mentioned earlier, he just needs a little hole. I wouldn't say he's at all close to an elite running back, but as far as his athleticism and his speed
and his determination too.
You're absolutely right. He puts his head down, he just goes. So I think if you're Penn State, you're right. There's definitely going to be times where you let up a 6, 7, 8 yard run, but do not let them get consistent in their run game. And because there's a couple games where they started to lean on it just a little bit, and they were able to start to break it open. But I don't think that's something, if you're Penn State, you're necessarily worried about. You want to create havoc for Miller Moss, and I think Tom Allen is going to come with a good game plan, creating a little bit of pressure. And like I said, I think that pressure will just come naturally. These two tackles are a complete mismatch for Dennis Sutton and Abdul Carter.
Yeah.
I think they both had a sack or two this year. I think this could really be their coming out party if they make Miller Moss hold it just a half a second longer, T. Frank.
When it comes to the run game, too, I guess the thing I'm interested in what we haven't necessarily seen as much this year from USC, I didn't notice it anyway, watching them in preparation this week, is the RPO. What made Lincoln Riley so famous at Oklahoma, of these wide open passing lanes for quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield, making talented players play in a situation where they have an advantage. I haven't seen that as much this year, and I think part of it is that run game where they don't have that going just yet. And so I'm super curious how that's going to play out, because, again, if you start attacking downhill, you coming downhill on that offensive line, and you've got a talented space player behind you, and they drop the ball off behind a linebacker's head, suddenly you're in a situation where you have to make that tackle in space, and that is sometimes a hard task. So for me, I know I'm killing you. I'm coming back in the conversation about the run game. I'm coming back to the passing game in this situation. Any last thoughts here on this particular side of the ball? Any other matchups you think are important, or players you want to single out for Penn State that you think can have an impact?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and people are saying in the comment section, is Nick Singleton. USC has been very susceptible to long runs this year. So far this year, they've given up rushes of 63, 47, 41, 40, and 39 yards all individually. So that is clear that they are not disciplined. They don't stay in their gaps, that type of thing. And I think you can take advantage of that if you're Nick Singleton. Now, my only question is, obviously, coming off of injury, how healthy is he? It seems like he's ready to go. And if we have that whole thunder and lightning thing back with Nick and Katron, could be a long day for this USC front seven. Now, the only thing with that, my question is, I think Lincoln Riley knows that. Now, does he come in with an idea of saying, hey, we're going to make Drew Aller beat us? And if you want a fair analysis, really up to this point, of Drew Aller, he has struggled a little bit in the bigger time games. We haven't seen him come out and just absolutely dominate.
Be locked in from the first play.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is exactly what I'm saying. And I think if I am Lincoln Riley, I say, hey, let's make him do that. I think, obviously are underdogs. And I think if you're going into this game saying, hey, I'm not going to let Penn State do to us what they did to Illinois and rush for 240 on the ground and just dominate. If I'm Lincoln Riley, I'm saying, hey, Drew Aller is going to beat me today, and I need to see these Penn State wide receivers do something a little more than we've seen up in the past. So hopefully Trey Wallace back involved again, I'm hoping.
We'll get into more of that on the other side, talking about the Penn State offense versus the USC defense. Before we get to that, though, I'm going to put out Tony Rojas out there, because Woody Marks in the passing game is also a high-volume target. Tony has been excellent at stopping receivers coming out of the backfield. He has been sticky in man coverage, and I think he is a real weapon on that level that Penn State has not had. I want to say, the last guy who covered like him might have been Brandon Bell. And I think Tony is he is ultra talented, so that is going to have to be a matchup advantage for Penn State if they do see a lot of screens and a lot of misdirection trying to get on the other side of that talented defensive line. That might be an area where Penn State puts them in a checkmate situation if Tony is playing on his game and he tackles well, because last week he really improved his tackling. Zakee Wheatley really improved his tackling, and so those two guys coming in locked in this game, I think the rally and tackle in space is super important, and I'm highlighting those two guys as players who took a step forward this week that we need to see that from again against USC. But we're going to talk about the offense. Who's the receiver of the week? There has been a different one every single week of the Penn State football season. Who's going to step up this week? What does the matchup say about what player and what skill sets might be the best advantage in this game? We're going to talk about that next on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. We'll be back on the Tailgate Show driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5 The Bus, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Before we get to that, we do have the Coach's Corner here on the Tailgate Show.
Press conferences are boring, right? That's why we've set aside the most important stuff for you. It's Coach's Corner, powered by Your Cigar Den and Monte Cristo Lounge, with free, easy in and out parking for all your tailgating needs. Check out Your Cigar Den's new Casa Cuban Lounge on Colonnade Boulevard next to Wegmans.
The Nittany Lions are heading westward. James Franklin and co. are gearing up for their matchup against the 3-2 USC Trojans at the LA Memorial Coliseum. When was the last time these two teams matched up in a non-bowl game, you ask? August 27th, 2000. I was, 4 months old back then. Well, the new look Big Ten has brought matchups like these ones with the Trojans to the forefront on a weekly basis. Coach Franklin gave us optimism in his press conference Monday, especially when it comes to his receiving core as it travels to Cali.
The thing that I do think is a positive is there's been a game where Omari's made some really big plays. There's been games where Trey's made some really big plays and been very productive. And then obviously Liam this past week and Julian has flashed. So, I think that's helpful. We'd like it to be a little bit more consistent. But I think it's helpful that when you watch our tape or when you study us, all those guys have made plays at times.
One skill position player who did not see the field in the 27-11 victory over UCLA last week was Nick Singleton. Number 10 found himself out for the game to the surprise of many. Singleton was listed as questionable heading into the noon kickoff, but James Franklin says it was up until game time. The star running back status was up in the air. But what does that mean for this week's matchup against USC? Well, let's hear.
And then Saturday, I wouldn't say he wasn't 100%, but again, we thought he was going to go. So I guess my point is he was very close to going last week. So as long as we don't have any setbacks this week, I would anticipate him going.
It took the Penn State offense 1 quarter to get going against the Bruins, but the Tom Allen coach defense started off hot out of the gate. One of this season's star performers so far has been Zane Durant. The junior interior defensive lineman has made his home in the opposing team's backfield this season, with 2.5 sacks and 5 tackles for loss through 5. Coach Franklin had high praise for Durant and made all Penn State fans bring out their history books just for one last lesson.
We've gotten used to around here defensive ends being disruptive. I don't know the last time we've had a defensive tackle as disruptive as Zane, and now that makes it challenging, right? You got a guy inside that you're watching on tape, and it's a concern. And now you got DNs on either side that can be problematic, and where are you going to pick your poison? I mean, you can't double them all.
Penn State has started 5-0 the past 4 seasons and is the only FBS school to do so. The fast starts have been followed by, rough stretches, as many Penn State fans will know. The question, how do James Franklin and co. change that moving forward, especially with an expanded college football playoff field?
We got to do the things that we've done to this point to get us to be 5-0. That's something that we can control. We got to make sure that we're doing it for the long haul, and that's as the schedule goes on and as the opponents get more and more challenging, and as you have bumps and bruises and things like that affect depth, you got to find solutions to give yourself the best chance to be successful.
That was your Penn State Coach's Corner. More from the Tailgate Show in a moment.
Alexander, we believe in.
So what are we talking about today with Penn State recruiting news after a UCLA game that was, I think, better than expected from a visitor list?
Yeah, I think the visitor list itself was very good for a noon kick. Again, we've mentioned the reasons for that. Penn State really emphasized getting guys here, especially in that 2025 flip class, and really pulled it off really well. Like I know it's 4 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a board of 10 or 12 guys, I mean, that's a third of the board right there. So it was a really good job by the recruiting staff to get those guys in. Again, we know they want to do it under the cover of darkness. We don't know they don't like it out there, but reported Lex Cyrus in advance, reported Brandon Finney in advance. Josh Johnson, a little bit of a surprise, and Gompers was in advance as well. Josh Johnson, the surprise, might all of a sudden be bubbling something. And if you looked yesterday, you saw that he is no longer by a literal flip target because he is uncommitted. He stepped away from his Louisville commitment on Wednesday morning, I believe it was, turning into Wednesday afternoon sometime. But that one was one that we had seen coming. If you're on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, you know that Penn State stands in a really great spot for him. Ryan, I hate to rain on his RPM here, but he put in a recruiting prediction machine pick for Josh Johnson from Ohio to go to Penn State. I agree with that. I think that's going to happen. I think it's going to happen soon. So really, really good effort there from the staff to not only get him in quietly. I mentioned him on the show a couple weeks ago, kind of as a throwaway. We'd heard his name popped about, but it's one of those things where you're not sure which direction they're going to go. And Josh Johnson, who almost committed to Penn State, or actually told us he committed to Penn State back in June, committed to Louisville. Now all of a sudden he's back on the market, and I think he's not going to be on the market very long. So that'll be an interesting fill for Antonio Branch. Johnson, more of a corner that's going to have to grow into a safety, kind of in the Zakee Wheatley mold, 6'2", 190. He's rangy, he runs pretty well. He went out and earned his offer from Penn State via the virtual combine, which you don't hear a ton about much anymore, but he did that and earned his opportunity in the class. They wanted him the first time around. When he committed to Louisville, they wanted him. I mean, this was in a situation where it was like, now we're going to move on and he's going to go somewhere else. They still wanted him. So I think it's an interesting projection. I think they're going to continue to go after guys like Byron Baldwin at safety, but at the same time, I mean, filling that spot in a couple of weeks with a bona fide Power 4 Division I guy, like that's a good step there. If Penn State can close the door, and I think they will in the next couple of days.
I was a huge fan of his the first time around this summer when we were talking about a guy who plays corner like a safety. And he's got obviously some of those metrics and the speed you talked about and the impressive stats that he put up in that virtual combine. But when you look at the film, and I apologize, I haven't seen any 2024 highlights from him to put out on the show.
He missed the first few games. He was hurt. So it just started his season a couple of weeks ago.
Gotcha. That makes sense then.
But he's a cover 3 corner is what he is. I mean, he's a guy that keeps it in front of you, which that can translate into safety.
Yes, and vicious when he got to the football in his highlights from last year. And I think Blaze Alexander Family Dealership, celebrating more than 40 years of service to the community. Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships has a vehicle to fit your budget and transportation needs. Home with a $1,000 lowest price guarantee with 20 locations throughout Pennsylvania. I am a customer, Blaze Alexander, always very happy with the service I get. Was just there this week, and there were some situations with my car, and they handled it. And not only that, for the inconvenience, they gave me a discount, which they didn't need to do. Always appreciate Blaze Alexander Mazda. Specifically, those guys are great. Where I take my car. Landon, it is the Penn State offense. I think the one part of this team that hasn't hit on all cylinders in one game. The running game has been excellent. The passing game has been excellent at times. But they've never had that complete 4-quarter performance. And I know slow starts have been a part of the conversation here. Coming into this game, Nick Singleton is back. How does that affect the game in your mind to give them the potential for that complete game? Is that possible today?
I think, it definitely helps that. I think, looking at last week, you look at every rushing game up to this point, 200 yards, 300 yards, UCLA, 80-something yards on the ground, and it's because Nick Singleton wasn't in the game. I think part of that was also UCLA said, hey, we're not going to let you beat us on the ground, and honestly, as a whole, UCLA just really wasn't a good team.
Yeah.
But you saw that we were missing Nick Singleton out there. You get him back, and I don't know what capacity that is. I'm sure he won't be necessarily 100%. And I think going into a bye week, it's one of those things, hey, kind of tough it out a little bit. You're headed into the bye, then you can really heal up. But you need Nick Singleton today. You need him to break off a couple long runs, which he has done to this point this year. That was really missing last year. A lot of people were asking, hey, where is freshman year Nick Singleton? He didn't go anywhere. I've talked about this before.
Yeah.
Chuck Losey was asked, hey, did Nick Singleton get his speed back this year? What happened? And, Chuck Losey with his mustache, hey, beast. And he said, no, it's been here the entire time.
Yeah.
And I think what Losey wanted to say is, the offensive coordinator is just getting Nick Singleton the ball in space.
Yep.
And Nick is just emphatically happier with Andy Kotonicki calling the plays because, like I said, he is just finding ways, not only Nick Singleton, Tyler Warren, a couple other guys, get them the ball in space, get the ball in their hands, and let them do stuff with it. Two of the most talented guys in all of college football, and he has continuously done a great job as that. So you talk about the run game. Maybe Tyler Warren's a little part of it too. Who knows? Get him back there at quarterback and continue to have fun with that. We saw the shovel pass to Tyler Warren as well. A lot of creative ways you can get different players involved in the run game.
I remember going back, this is taking us back to February, and I was watching Andy Kotelnicki's offense, digesting what they were doing at Kansas, and I said, most of this works. Most of this is something that Penn State can do. They have the talent to do it. Obviously, starting with Nick Singleton, Devin Neal, Katron Allen, a really good comparison between those three backs of what they can do, and the translation. Penn State's offensive line, that is a probably improved unit. Not probably, definitely a better unit than what he had at Kansas. The one thing I did not know how they were going to incorporate was the quarterback run game. Jason Bean, Jalen Daniels, Drew Aller. And it turns out they're doing the full Kansas. I didn't know. Could they do full Kansas? They went full Kansas. They just insert Tyler Warren. They just white out Jalen Daniels, and they put in Tyler Warren or Nick Singleton into the run game or Bo Prabula in order to get all of those different facets of this offense. That does bring up a conversation point that we've had over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, that people have had here on the YouTube channel, that I don't know how to feel about this comment, but it has come up enough that I do want to talk to you about it. People keep saying this offense is too cute. It's too gimmicky. And I think part of that is the Bo Prabula package coming in and people feeling like it disrupts Drew Aller's rhythm. How do you feel about that comment and critique of what they've done so far?
Well, here's the thing with the Bo package. When Bo comes in and he has a 10-plus yard play, the Bo package is fantastic, and you want to come back to it.
Yeah.
When Bo comes in and has a 2-yard play or a pick, and it's like, this is the worst package ever, get this out of here, why do we do this?
Right.
So, it's how you're seeing the glass, half empty or half full. But I think, yes, a little bit, if I am Andy Kotelnicki in a game like this, if Drew Aller is driving down the field, do I want to put Bo in on a 2nd and 6, and then maybe instead of just keeping that chugging, and then 2nd and 6, and then he tackle for loss, and it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, and that's the world you're living in? I think you want to be careful with that. And I will say, up to this point, it has felt outside of West Virginia when Bo threw that touchdown to Tyler Warren, it's kind of felt like the Bo package was a little bit ineffective.
Yeah.
And
predictable. I think that's the biggest problem, is because it has been all run. Like, it has been a run game situation, and to me, that is more of my critique of it, is that when Bo Prabula comes into the game, the defense knows it's going to be an option play, and he's likely going to keep it if they put him in a situation where the read and all of his rules say he has to keep the ball. So you can almost force him to keep the ball into situations that don't look great, including a 3rd down stop that they only got a yard last week that resulted in a field goal attempt, which was Penn State's final play on offense in that UCLA game. So I think that's also part of the conversation of the call and the situation of said calls, instead of allowing Drew Aller on 3rd and 5 after he had been hot all game to come in and throw the football. And I guess that's the interesting thing to me, is Drew Aller has not thrown the football a whole lot, and the opposite of Miller Moss is Drew Aller, where his performance so far this season is almost all bombs away. It's a lot of aggressive downfield passing. Is that something they can get to today, do you think, with USC's zone-based, conservative, keep a lid on everything defense?
I do think I think they really will be able to stretch the field, talking Amari Evans, talking Trey Wallace. And when you look at USC's pass rush, it is essentially non-existent. 1 sack over the past 2 games, and then they are dead last in pressures on the quarterback in the entire Big Ten. All 18 teams, they are the dead last. And I think about 13 out of 18 teams, they have 70 or more pressures. USC doesn't even have 50 pressures. Ooh. So, pretty much, they are bottom of the barrel when it comes to pass rush. What that means is Drew Aller has time back there to deliver some passes. So that's why I do say I could see this being a little bit more of a Drew Aller game. I think everybody says, hey, it's run. I think USC is going to come in and say, hey, we're not going to allow them to get Nick and Katron going, even though we're still going to run the ball, you best believe, and that is the identity. But I think where we win this game is if Drew Aller can be efficient through the air and continue to really play turnover-free football.
Yeah.
And so I have to give you this stat, actually, that I came across. Shout out to Joe Haas. The FBS record for the lowest percent of passes intercepted in a career is 1.2%, set by Marcus Mariota for Oregon back in 2012 to 2014, meaning that 1.2% of Marcus Mariota's passes were intercepted.
Right.
Very low number.
Yep.
Up to this point, Drew Aller is at 0.5% of his passes intercepted.
Wow.
That is really good. So Drew Aller, if he continues on this track this year, and let's say he goes to the league, very likely will set a record for basically the least turnover-y quarterback in college football history.
Turnover-worthy
quarterback in college football history. He needs to continue to do that today because I think USC will turn the ball over. I think that is going to be where the game is won, is the turnover battle, and that question really lies within the Penn State passing game. Can you stretch the field and get the ball to the wide receivers without turning the ball over if you're Drew Aller?
And they have been very good at that. Drew Aller does not have the volume of passes, but he has completed 66% of his passes 20 yards or more down the field. That is number one I think that might be number one in college football. He's tied for number one in college football. So the volume isn't necessarily there, and this is, again, what we saw on film from Kansas. The quality over the quantity in the passing numbers has been there, and Drew has been very good in these situations of making the right decision, and sometimes the right decision isn't to throw it. There is just this always comes off as a certain way, but I have a high opinion of what Drew Aller can be and what Drew Aller can do with the football. I think there's more in store. There are some plays on film, if you want this offense to really, really cook, I think if he's just a tad more aggressive, risks a couple more of those interceptions, maybe he gets up to 1% turnover-worthy plays, but he generates more explosion in the passing game, then you have a complete offense. So I call it athletic hubris. I know what you're talking about. You know what I'm talking, like, you know what you're talking about. You line up and you're like, oh, I can take that guy.
Absolutely.
The guy across from you, they've got nothing on you. I think Drew can stand to say, I'm Drew Aller. I'm Drew bleeping Aller. I'm going to put the ball by that guy's ear hole. He's not going to bat it down. He's not going to intercept it. And there is, I think, more opportunity for him to expand that. But in that is the receiver room. And we have talked about this quite a bit. I know your position, they need to have a number one receiver. This is a game where volume of underneath targets might actually go up given the way USC plays football. They play a lot of soft zone, giving you those underneath plays, trying to make you work the way down the field. Who's the receiver that can make that the defense pay for that decision?
Yeah, I mean, I think underneath when you were throwing to, let's say, Amari Evans on a drag, on a slant, and has the ability to then get a lot of run after catch, and that's something that you and me talked about with that off coverage where they're sitting back a little bit. When the receivers catch the ball, it's not turn and tackle, it is turn and you have 5 yards of space.
Yep.
What type of move can you put on that defensive back to then create more run after catch yards? I think Amari Evans is that guy. I think Tyler Warren is that guy. As much as you think of him as a bigger target, doesn't maybe move as well, obviously, as a smaller wide receiver. But Tyler Warren breaks a lot of tackles, and when he gets going, that's 260, 6'5", headed in another direction that you got to take down. Yeah. So I definitely think there is some opportunity there. And then Nick Singleton in the passing game, I think, is something that we have talked about up to this point of him really just getting a lot better and improving in the receiving game. But now coming into this week, we kind of forgot about it. He was out for UCLA. And you kind of need to pull out all the stops if you're Penn State against USC this weekend. I think Nick Singleton will have 3 to 4 catches in today's game just because of, like you said, how USC is going to play this Penn State offense.
Yeah.
Look for a lot of dump-off, underneath passes. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Penn State get the screen game going. Yeah. I can tell you right now, that is something that we've never really been very good at, and the coaches make us practice it a lot. There's a screen period where you're going through, and you're running basically every single screen you have, and we do that normally once or twice a week in practice, in season, because you need – the screen game, it's so
timing.
Big. It's timing. It is. You have to practice it. But if you are good at screens, you can be really good. So I'm sure that's something that Penn State is practicing. Be on the lookout for a couple screen passes from Penn State today.
And you'd like to see that with as athletic as the offensive line, a guy like Drew Shelton getting out and running. And I know he's not a starter, but Javen Williams talked to me this summer about, like, this offense and this scheme allows you to get out and run, and that's the thing he loves to do, is be athletic, get to that second level. You know, Juice Scruggs dropped weight in order to be more athletic this year, and he got some big hosses in the middle. I know Venga isn't going to win a 40, but he's pretty quick. You know, he can get out in space and do some damage. We saw him pull most recently.
Juice Scruggs.
What did I say?
Are you talking Nick Dawkins?
Nick Dawkins. Oh, my goodness.
That's actually great. I think, Doc would love that, to
man.
hear that, actually. Juice, I will say this real quick. If we're on the topic, Juice, who's starting center for the Texans right now, he's absolutely killing it.
I've done that all year, by the way. This is the first time it's actually just leaked out. Oh, my gosh.
I just liked it because I figured, if you're going to bring up Juice Scruggs, we need to give him a shout-out. One of the best linemen to play here in a long time, and one of the reasons why the offensive line room is the way it is today. Sorry. So I had to give that side note. But, yes, Nick Dawkins did drop some weight. Playing loose. We saw what Venga Ioane happens when you put him in motion. The whole nation saw what Venga Ioane did to 98 of UCLA last week, just brutalized him. And can you imagine being 98? Like, it's one thing to be going viral, like if you're the defensive back that like OBJ caught the ball on or like that type of thing. But imagine being viral for, just getting decimated by a 350-pound man, and you got to walk to your class. And guess what? Everybody in his class at USC knows that it was 98 that got flattened by another man. Just saying, because if he raises his hand to talk in class, they're going to say, hey, shut up, you got pancaked. And then that's it. Like, it's one thing to get pancaked, no one notices, but you get flattened and put on national television.
Yeah.
I digress.
With a lineman in motion.
In motion. It's scary. So hopefully we see more of that today. I think in every single game but one has a Penn State offensive lineman lined up in the slot wide receiver position. I could be wrong. I might not have just seen it, but I know for a fact every game but one. So it's going to be fun to see how creative Andy Kotelnicki gets today.
That 6 offensive lineman package, something that I previewed coming into the year, that I thought there's an opportunity because they have so much depth, they have so much talent, the ability to move guys around and put 6 offensive linemen strategically on the field and not just in goal line situations. Kotelnicki will think outside the box and use these guys in different ways. I want to highlight Julian Fleming. And when we talk about a game against zone, Penn State fans, I think, have been a little bit frustrated with the hype of Julian Fleming coming in January, and then, especially at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, we have tried to contextualize, hey, he's going to have a role in the offense. Do you think this is the number one receiver? That's not what they brought him in here to do. They brought him in here to be a stable force, a guy that can get open against zone, soak up some targets, get you first downs. This is a big game where I don't know that he's going to have a catch and run for an explosive play or anything. We have seen him do that as a zone buster against, I think, what was the game where he had the catch and run?
It was Kent State.
It was Kent State. I could see something like that in this game, but just generally getting him open because he's going to be at the right spot. He's going to present a good target. He's going to box out his defender, and he's going to catch the football. And in a situation where maybe you need to chain some first downs together, Drew hits him on target. I think that's going to be a stable connection. But the guy that last week popped off film was Liam Clifford. And this is the thing that I'm interested in. If they can get that underneath game going, Liam Clifford over the middle, especially like we saw last week, this is the same defense. Danton Lynn left UCLA, and they tried to keep the same defensive structure in place. So they had a week to work on this. And I just think Drew Aller, his ability to see the field and dissect zones, watch out, because those will take care of themselves in the game where Drew Aller, if he sees it pre-snap, it's the same thing he expected. That's going to be a big play for this offense. I still think that's available this week.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that the defense from USC is going to give Aller that he likes. Something I do want to, we talked about starting fast, starting slow. We have obviously at Penn State started slow for a little while now. If you can start fast, you can put USC away. Right now, as we sit, USC has not scored as far as in-game minutes. USC has not scored for like 20 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
The Lincoln Riley ended the game against Minnesota not scoring for 20 consecutive minutes. From 3 minutes left in the third quarter, the entire fourth quarter, no points scored by USC due to a couple turnovers.
Yeah.
So USC has been struggling with punching the ball into the end zone. If this Penn State defense can hold up today and kind of allow, give some short fields to Drew Aller, take the ball away a couple times from that USC offense, could be a good day.
It's a great point, too, that we mentioned a couple of these stats about USC, how many times Miller Moss has thrown the football, how many times they've gotten sacks. They haven't had a lead in a game either. This is also a team that does not start fast. So when you look at the matchup, hopefully it is not a unappealing grind to start the game. Hopefully something happens. And for Penn State fans, hopefully good stuff happens where they start hot. But that's another reason they haven't had good sack situations. Not only do they not have great personnel to get after the quarterback necessarily in terms of a premier pass rusher or a depth of them, but they also haven't had as many good opportunities as some of the other teams that they have faced. And when you're down, that's the whole ball game. If Penn State starts fast, you can't throw screens all day. You have to start pushing the ball. The game pressure then leads you to do some more desperate things. The more desperate a team is, the more risks they take, the more opportunities you have to get to the quarterback. So that's going to be a big thing, is how the fast starts. Whoever gets out to a fast start in this game will break a trend and also have a huge advantage.
You know what else is going to be important, T. Frank? Not missing field goals. Are you? Let me just ask you. You confident right now in a 45-yard field goal by Penn State?
I don't have a way to get out. Oh, wait, no, we have to take a break. Look at that.
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, no, let's stop. I just want to talk about it real quick.
I am more confident after seeing Ryan Barker last week. I think 45 is where you got me nervous, because I don't know about his leg, and I'm assuming that's part of the conversation, is the reason he wasn't given in a tiebreaker. He might not have the stronger leg, but I would rather see them go for it in that situation anyway. So, to me, it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Something I didn't get to mention, you talk about going for it. I do want to mention this. When we were talking about Drew Allard, I need to circle back on the passing game for 1 second. Against Illinois, we had a 3rd and 6 that we decided to use Tyler Warren on. We ended up converting. He had K-Tron on the jet motion. He kept it, gashed him up the middle. That was cool, but running the ball with your quarterback on 3rd and 6, questionable. We come back later in the game, and this is when Sander had missed the kicks, and there was really no confidence. And it was 3rd and 7. And then we did the same exact thing. Put Tyler Warren in, and there was like a 3-yard rush for a gain. And then it was 4th down. Are you a little bit worried about the fact of, does it feel like maybe they don't fully trust Drew Allard all the way? When I talk about like 2 different 3rd and mediums, and you don't give your star quarterback the ability to extend the drive, I mean, that's just what I'm seeing. It's just, that's a big question mark to me. As much as you love Tyler Warren.
No, I agree, and that's where I think the gimmicky part of the offense comes into, where some of the fair criticism is just let your quarterback throw the football. Because up until this, there hasn't been a pass rusher that they have seen that I feel like consistently gives them problems, despite the fact that I think they were a little bit vulnerable at tackle, as opposed to last year, obviously. But Drew Shelton, he had to knock a little bit of the rust off early in the season. So maybe it isn't even that they don't trust Drew Allard. Maybe they just don't want to put their tackles in a situation where they have to pass block in like true, obvious passing situations more than they need to. But I agree. I want to see that. In those situations, I want to see them throw the football. But if you're not going to, Landon, and you're going to run your quarterback on 3rd down in these kind of mixed decision areas of the field, get enough yards and then go for it on 4th down. Like that, if that's your plan, then execute the plan instead of doing half of the plan. And so that, I think, has been something they need to work through, is the 3rd down decision making of going for it, making sure you get enough yardage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Something that they'll have to. If you just get explosive plays and touchdowns, you don't need to worry about that as much, which is something that I think is understated, that they need to, kind of find a way to plunge the dagger earlier into the opponent from a offensive perspective. We'll be back with more on the Penn State football tailgate show coming up. We have This Week in Penn State Sports. We'll be back on the Penn State football tailgate show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships on 99.5, 107.5 The Bus, Bigfoot Country Legends, and streaming on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. Here is your This Week in Penn State football.
It's more than just football at Penn State. Here's This Week in Penn State Sports, brought to you by Bobby Rahal Lexus in Lewistown. Get ready to experience luxury like never before at Bobby Rahal Lexus of Lewistown. We are Nittany Valley's award-winning Lexus dealership at 425 Electric Avenue. Visit us on the web at BobbyRahalLexusofLewistown.com.
Ice hockey season is here, and so are the Nittany Lions. The Northern Lights were a perfect backdrop for a perfect start to the season for the 24th best team in the nation. Penn State came home with 2 straight wins over Alaska in Fairbanks this past weekend. The 4-3 OT win and a 5-zip second game showcased how the team can skate their way through the field. Sophomores Reese Laubach and Aiden Fink have led the line to the first weekend. Laubach had 2 team-leading goals and 1 assist, while Fink had 4 assists to go along with a lone goal. The duo are hoping to lead the team as they head to Hamden, Connecticut later tonight. Puck drop against the 8th-ranked Quinnipiac Bobcats is slated for 7 p.m. in the Nutmeg State. Men's soccer continued their hot streak after taking down the Rutgers Scarlet Knights on Monday. Boubacar Kamara scored the pair of goals that downed Rutgers at Jeffrey Field. His season total now sits at 4 goals through 7 games played. The Nittany Lions began their road trip yesterday in Bloomington against Indiana before they head out to Seattle for a matchup against Washington next Friday. Cale Sanderson and the men's wrestling team officially knows when it is returning to the mat. The NWCA All-Star Classic exhibition at Rec Hall kicks off the season on November 16th for the reigning NCAA champs. Keep your calendars clear for January 31st and February 7th when Iowa and Michigan respectively visit Happy Valley. The reason why? Both matchups are going to take place in the Bryce Jordan Center rather than Rec Hall. And speaking of the BJC, full schedule releases also came for the men's and women's basketball teams. The opening tip matinee will kick off on November 4th with the Lady Lions taking on Bucknell at 5 p.m. and then Mike Rhodes and the men's team facing Binghamton at 7:30 following the conclusion of the Lady Lions game. That was This Week in Penn State Sports. Back to the Tailgate Show in a moment.
But he's going to go see some prospects on Friday morning, get around to some schools. It's what he's been doing at the home base for home games, going out, getting to some schools, coming back, doing meetings in State College, and then at night going back to games in that area or different areas or whatever it was. Last week it was Harrisburg. He's been all around. He was in New York a couple of weeks ago, Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago. So he's been all over the place. But going out west, they have an opportunity because Penn State recruits California now. Who saw that one coming?
Right.
But you've got LeVar Arrington II out there, Darius Dixon out there. Madden Williams was just here a couple of weeks ago. But Mater Dei's got a game tomorrow, another big game tomorrow night, as they always do. And then Troy Hune down closer to San Diego. So it's not really LA, but if you have an opportunity to get down there and get out and about, I think they're going to take that opportunity. So we'll kind of dig deeper on this and see where they get to. But they don't always go out on the road whenever they're on, or excuse me, they don't always go out to recruit when they're on the road. But I think this one, it makes too much sense just to go out and see those guys and just be seen, really. And I think that's what we're looking at. So LeVar, Darius Dixon, Troy Hune, all the commitments out there. Again, 3 commitments over 2 classes in California is pretty remarkable, especially because they're California kids. It's not like a situation where, you had a guy that like TA that was from somewhere and transferred to Santa Margarita or something like that. They're all California kids, and Penn State doing a good job there. Troy Hune, big game last week in a I don't know if we'll call it an upset, but it was a rivalry game. So to throw a couple of touchdowns and to produce the offense that they were able to produce, I think is a good sign. I think he's throwing the ball well. Watched one of his full games the other day. It's really interesting watching high school football. The full games are very different than the highlights. But his full games I have nothing to worry about there in terms of being a passer.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting when most people think recruiting, they think additions, but Penn State is very much targeting the players they already have and trying to maintain and retain those players. I know that just because of the distance, we've put Darius Dixon on that who knows category of, I don't want to even call him a potential flip target, but just the ease with which you feel about a guy who's in Latrobe versus a guy who is at Mater Dei is probably pretty different. So is that right? Or do you think that there is also the element of trying to see a Madden Williams and trying to dig even deeper to get more ties established with other programs and other recruits in 26 or maybe even in 25 if there's a guy?
Yeah, if you look at the travel schedule this fall, it's almost exclusively been based around guys that you have committed. Now, obviously, made not a big deal, but they made a trip for like Cyrus last week. They went down to McDonough a couple of weeks ago. But of course, you got Jeff Exner at McDonough in addition to Brandon Finney. So you've got like basically this is where your travel starts, and then you just have some side quests based off of that. Seeing some schools that you're usually coming through, seeing places where you know that you'll be seeing something bigger. Definitely good.
We believe in helping our community become a better place to live and work.
Will visit or have visited and will visit. He'll get out to some of those schools that they're familiar with because, with bringing in a kid that's 2,500 miles away, it's all about relationships.
Because it's the right thing to do and because we are more than a car dealer. At Blaze Alexander Subaru of Lewistown.
Now, back to the Penn State Football Tailgate Show, driven by Blaze Alexander Family Dealerships. Let's see what's happening around the Big Ten. Brought to you by Valley View Retirement Community. Enrich your life on Valley View Retirement Community's 50-plus acre campus in Big Valley, PA. Award-winning residential, personal care, skilled nursing, rehab, and memory care for older adults.
We're going to take a look around the Big Ten as we always do at this time in the show because Penn State fans want to know about the race to the Big Ten championship game and ultimately the postseason, the college football playoff, and the games around Penn State will make an impact on that. So last night, I believe we had Northwestern 37, spanking Maryland in this situation, and now Iowa 17-7 over Washington. Washington beat Michigan. Everything's topsy-turvy. It feels like the middle is kind of falling out of the Big Ten right now, Landon.
Yeah, a little bit. Speaking of that, Wisconsin up 14-0 on Rutgers.
Yeah.
Rutgers we were talking about them a couple of weeks ago, like they were king, and how the mighty have fallen very quickly. So that's interesting to see.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, not very mighty. Propped up by the media at least, but not actually very good.
Propped up by wanting to talk about something different.
Exactly. I still think it is going to be the top 3-4-ish teams. I'm curious to see kind of how Michigan rounds out the end of this year.
Yeah.
But I think it is very clear that there is a upper echelon of Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon in the Big Ten right now.
And look at that. Penn State is still third. I mean, I know not right now, not specifically right now, but they are still in that top three despite all of the things that have changed, despite some of the hand-wringing about what would happen with USC coming into the conference. Penn State is still in, maybe even with the door cracked open, Landon, to move into that top two?
I mean, definitely with Ohio State playing Oregon tonight, I think that there is obviously an opportunity. And I think, by the way, I was thinking about this last night. If you're a Penn State fan, I think you want Ohio State to win. You don't want Ohio State to beat Oregon because we don't play Oregon. We play Ohio State. So I know naturally if you are a Penn State fan, you're going to be rooting against Ohio State. It is in our best interest, if you are a Penn State fan, as far as the playoffs and all that other jazz goes, that Ohio State beats Oregon because we don't have an opportunity against Oregon to do anything.
Right.
We do against Ohio State. So it would be better for Oregon to get the loss and us get to play an undefeated Ohio State. So should be fun to watch, though. 2 versus 3. I think I saw NBC hasn't had that type of matchup in like 40 years or something. Should be a fun game to watch.
Yeah. So there are 4 undefeated teams in the Big Ten right now. Ohio State and Oregon play today, so there will be 1 fewer after tonight at 7:30. Penn State and Indiana undefeated in the Big Ten schedule and overall.
The number 1 team in the Big Ten, Indiana?
Yeah, the number 1 team in the Big Ten, Indiana. Okay. Yeah, they have they are impressive. Yeah. I think surprisingly in a lot of ways. Now I know that the coaching staff came in with a lot of people in the football world thinking very highly of them, and they have pretty much outperformed all of the optimistic expectations for them so far. Nebraska right behind at 5-1, and of course then Michigan at 4-2, Washington at 4-2. So just an update in the standings as well and what's on the line for Penn State today as they head over to USC, who is 3-2 and obviously wants to stay in pace for something in the postseason mirage that might be on their horizon. In this game against Ohio State, Oregon, I don't know if you've seen Oregon a whole lot. I don't know if you've seen Ohio State a whole lot this year, but what's interesting to you in that matchup that you think is going to be a big factor in the game?
Yeah, I think Ohio State could blow Oregon out. That's how I feel. I just said that.
Yep.
Dylan Gabriel has been incredibly loose with the football. In his past 2 games, he's had 3 goal line turnovers, meaning that they were on the 10-yard line or closer, and he has thrown a pick to the other team. One of those against UCLA, where it was a pick 6 back, 100-yard pick 6. I'm curious to see. I think there is such a stigma around this 5th year, 6th year, whatever it is, quarterback going to a really good team, where it's like, hey, they just need a quarterback to round it out, and it's because it works so well with Bo Nix. And I think a lot of people said, hey, Dylan Gabriel, this is Bo Nix situation, going to come here and shine, be the Heisman, number 1 Heisman candidate. Hasn't necessarily been that up to this point. I mean, I'm not going to say he's played bad. He's still played good football, but I just think when you play a team like Ohio State, those little mistakes where you're loose with the football in the red zone, those start to get amplified a little bit. So I'm curious to see, but in my opinion, I think there is very much a world to where Ohio State goes in there and beats them by 2 to 3 touchdowns.
So it is interesting. You mentioned what I think is really important in this particular conversation about Dylan Gabriel, targeted by Oregon to come in after the success of Bo Nix going there. I think generally of the way he played and where he ended up being a first-round draft pick quarterback after a tumultuous time at Auburn. But I think we've decided that whenever a team targets a veteran quarterback that it's automatically going to be great, especially in these situations with these particular teams. But we've forgotten this is who Dylan Gabriel has been the entire time. You go back to UCF, he was a wide-open quarterback that made some dangerous throws. He's had this turnover knack in him this whole time, and I guess the thought was, well, so did Bo Nix, and then Bo Nix, it was eradicated at Oregon. And Dylan Gabriel is much better than he was in his previous iterations, at Oklahoma or at UCF. But at Oregon, he has limited those turnovers. They're just still there instead of being completely eliminated with Bo Nix. And the thing I think is interesting is this is they spam the screen game quite a bit. They run a lot of these RPOs and screen passes. So I'm wondering, against an athletic team like Ohio State, does that really work? Because you got to have athletes in space, but they've got athletes in space.
They do. They got, like Sonny Styles. There's a couple guys for that Ohio State defense where it's like, they are big-time playmakers. And like you said, Oregon loves those quick screens. They have two of the fastest wide receivers in college football, so you will give them that. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it kind of all shakes out today. I think Ohio State is easily the most talented team in college football as far from a standpoint of just the skill of their players, and because they were bought and paid for. Just put that out there.
Well, it's not even a secret, right?
No, it's not. It's known. It is absolutely known because that was the talk of the offseason. Then Ryan Day essentially gets another chance of just full support backing him, and let's see what he does. Today is Ohio State's first real test, so I think we're going to get a lot of answers. Other thing, Alabama, I think it's been 12 unanswered to South Carolina right now. It's 12-14, Alabama leads.
They are reeling a little bit, it would seem.
Yeah, interesting to see how Alabama's going to fully bounce back. Should be, I don't know. USC saying South Carolina, excuse me.
Yeah.
Looks like a decent team to see. They have that defensive end that looks like just a maniac. So
Dylan Stewart?
Yeah, Dylan Stewart.
He was
really good.
He's from the D.C. area, right?
He
I
is.
know Penn State was in on him early in terms of they were interested, and obviously his recruiting blew up to a national level at that point.
I knew I was going to find a segue into this.
Yeah?
Dylan Stewart, really good Maryland guy. Does it, doing his thing down there as a young cat. He went viral on Twitter for sacking the quarterback and then pretending to basically shoot a gun into the quarterback.
Execution style.
Yeah, exactly. So it leads me into my fun stat of the week. From what I understand, there has been 4 documented penalties this year for brandishing a weapon. That is, when you celebrate, they've been a lot more looser with the celebrations the referees had.
Yeah.
If you do anything that involves a weapon, it is a 15-yard penalty. Fun fact, 2 of those 4 have come against a USC team. So hopefully there's no, like the K-Tron celebration, kick the door down. Hopefully, by the way, K-Tron almost hit the ref in the eye. Did you see that? Did anybody catch that? When he kicked down, the ref came and he was ready for it against UCLA last week.
Yeah.
And he tried to stop the celebration.
I did see that.
I don't know if it's smart for you to try to stop a celebration where it's multiple people trying to kick in a door with their cleat. I digress.
But we need to make sure that there's orderly conduct post-play because, heaven forbid somebody gets their feelings hurt in a game where you can physically get hurt. But I don't know. I don't have an opinion on those things because I've never been on the field. So there's that. I'm going to broach this topic gently because this is dangerous water for me. We talked about the kicking game a little bit earlier, but we got a couple minutes here before we get to our final break. And I want to talk about special teams. I break down about 120 plays each game. I leave special teams up to the gods, honestly. The football gods can take care of those because I don't have time. I don't know anything about special teams, but I do know that Zachariah Branch is unbelievably talented. So in this particular game, baseline, who do you think has the advantage on special teams?
Yeah, like you said, I think it's USC. Zachariah Branch last year, he was first-team PFF all-team punt returner. He was first-team, I believe, USA Today all-team punt returner. So consensus #1 punt returner in America as a true freshman. That is dangerous. Now, where it gets more dangerous in college than even the NFL, and you wonder why there's more punt returns in college than the NFL, it's because the punt teams in college have 3 offensive linemen on it. That is not the case in the NFL. So you have whoever, it's Cooper Cousins and 2 other big dudes back there. So imagine Cooper Cousins, as good as he is on the offensive line. We love him. He's going to be great.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like Cooper Cousins in space against Zachariah Branch. So I say
it's a little different than pulling.
Yes,
yeah, a little bit different.
It absolutely is. So now Penn State in the past, I will say this, and it's all different coordinators for the special teams, but we have been really good at bottling in really good return men.
Yeah.
Think about Charlie for Iowa. Charlie's
Kohler?
Not Kohler. Not Kohler. Charlie something. Charlie Jones.
Charlie Jones?
Charlie Jones.
Yeah.
He plays in the NFL now. I just saw him the other day. Was elite punt returner for Iowa, and we bottled him in pretty well. So hopefully we do that today. I think that is where the main matchup is Penn State's punt team to USC's punt return team.
And Riley Thompson has been good. So I think that last week was not a great game for him, but he is if you go on do you trust X, I do trust Riley Thompson to punt the ball well. The thing that I always wonder, and I'm wondering if this maybe was something that was happening last week, but again, I don't follow special teams in depth, is were they changing things in preparation for Branch where they're going to punt differently, you're trying to angle the punt differently than just your standard kicks, and that kind of affected his flow and rhythm out there on the field. One of the things I've found is when you try to do too much to mitigate a guy, you might just give them free yards by shanking the ball out of bounds, and you almost get the same thing. So to me, I think they've got to stay kind of in between the lines of we're good at these things, we've done these things well, and trust your players to make plays out there instead of trying to eliminate the player by putting them in a situation where then the punter has to do all the work.
Yeah. I got a quick bold prediction.
Okay.
I think we'll run a fake today. Something fake.
Interesting.
Something. Yeah, we're gonna fake something.
All right.
We've been known to do that in big games in the past.
Yeah, that's yes.
Just throw it out there.
Yeah.
I'm calling it.
Now, 2 kids, 1 wife, all PSU here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel. If you want to join us, we're having a great time. A lot of people over here watching me and Landon talk on film, which we look great here. The guys from Seven Mountains have done an excellent job setting us up here at the Field Burger and Tap. If you want to come out here watch the game here, they got all kinds of. They got a great bar. They've got a great environment. I love being in here. It's just like my vibe. It's just all wood and metal and beer, and
alcohol,
it's great. So if you want to come and check that out, you can check that out here. But he asks, how do you feel about an O-line without a healthy Anthony Donko? What is your expectation for him today? Penn State head coach James Franklin, I said this in the feature, and sorry, I've talked myself into a situation where you got about 20 seconds to answer. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, no Anthony Donko hurts a lot. Way better in pass pro than Nolan Rucci. I don't think you're missing that much in the run game. I think they are both really good in the run game, but you are a little bit worried about Nolan Rucci ducking his head and getting swam around in pass pro, getting Drew Aller hit.
Yeah, so we'll be watching that. I'll be doing my terrible MS Paint job during the game to bring you any of those ideas of what might be happening with that particular matchup, because it's one that I have my eye on as well in this game. Predictions coming up next on the Penn State Football Tailgate Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back to tell you exactly how this is going to go down out in LA later today. So let's get into our game predictions for this week. And you and I end up, I think, in the same spot. And I'm always interested in, because we don't talk about these things. We don't go, hey, what do you think of this game? What do you think of the prediction, the final score? And yet this week there was more divergence in the staff. What have you learned from Penn State and what have you learned from USC that brought you to your final prediction here?
Just watching USC up front, I mean, I think Penn State has an opportunity to dictate both lines of scrimmage, and I know that it's a road game, and Penn State hasn't been really firing on all cylinders. I don't think they're going to fire on all cylinders on Saturday. I don't think so. But USC has shown some weakness there, and I think that's tough to overcome because you're talking about the most effective unit. Like we're going back to West Virginia game, the most effective unit on the field, I think, is going to be Penn State's defensive line, and that's a big deal because that means tip balls. That can mean just throwing the ball away, taking an intentional grounding or something like that. Like those things matter, and I think Penn State's got an opportunity to do that. Now, what they can't do is they can't get ahead of themselves, pin those ears back, get too far up the field. Miller Moss is not a big runner, but he will get a first down if you give him 14 yards to run 7, he will get that first down. I mean, it's kind of the same things that we've been talking about all year. So you'd like to see them start hot. I haven't seen any evidence that tells me that they're going to start hot. So I think it would be another one of those close games through the first half, and we will see. Special teams has to be better, like flat out. Like there's no like way to dress that one up. Riley Thompson, I thought, was good for the first few weeks of the season, was not good this week. This is going to be a very important game for him. Again, I mentioned if you can get a couple of first downs, pin them back, and make them run the full length of the field, I think it gives you an advantage as a defense. So it's been very interesting to watch that this year play out as compared to last year. Penn State's defense last year was setting them up in great spots. This year, setting him up in good spots, decent spots, but like the field position last year was so much better, and it wasn't really about the kicking game. I think it was more about the defense, and a couple of first downs here and there can flip the field. But those special teamers are going to have to be good. Ryan Barker's going to have to make kicks. Zion Tracy's going to have to catch punts and maybe return punts, but I'd rather him just, catch it and then see what goes from there. The thing about USC's punter, he has gotten acclimated to the Big Ten by booming some really, really good punts.
He's trying out for his Iowa scholarship.
I mean, hey, everybody wants to be an Iowa punter, I guess. But no, Michael Lance, he's got, Mike, I'm on the wrong one. Eddie Capel. I'm not even going to try that one, but 16 punts, a 50-yard average. I scrolled right by it, and I've got my microphone in the way here. A 50-yard average. That is very Big Ten. But I will say this: 14 kicks, or excuse me, I will say this, and I'll get the stat wrong. 16 kicks, 4 fair catches. That's interesting to me because what Riley Thompson has done very well is fair catches, no return yards, all that kind of stuff. So be interesting to see if Zion Tracy has an opportunity this week.
So Fitz, what did you see with the defense yesterday?
I'm going to set up like a lounge chair on the defensive field next time and just sit there and observe because there's really not much to take in. I mean, it's really business as usual for Penn State's defense. Now there are a couple things that we picked up and observations were up last night on the site. But in terms of personnel, like I think the biggest question people had was Kobe King because you've seen limited reps from him the last couple of games. I think you can explain that one away in the.
You lock it up. Here's the expert predictions for today's game.
So we're going to get to our predictions, and then we got some good news, some breaking good news for Penn State football to get to on the other side of that. So give us your prediction here, Landon, for Penn State USC 3:30 kick this afternoon.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight one. I think this is defined by the turnover battle. I think Penn State in the past 2 games has turned the ball over 1 time. USC in that same span, 6 turnovers. Outside of that, I think Miller Moss is going to take advantage of a Penn State defense that in the secondary isn't necessarily great. I think that is the weakest point of the defense. So we're going to see what he can do there with some really good playmakers for USC. And then on the other side, Drew Aller, it's going to be interesting to see what type of mindset USC's defense comes out with. Are they going to try to stop the run? And that is what I predict. I think Penn State is going to run the ball. USC will try to stop it and make Drew Aller beat them with his arm. My final prediction is 27-7 Penn State. I think they eke it out. I think it is very close, but I think Penn State will take this one in NLA.
Wow. Yep. 27-7. I'm going 28-17. I think USC is going to get some yards. You may not love the way it feels for most of the time, but I don't think they're going to score. And here's the thing. You asked about trust. Do you trust the kicking game for Penn State? I trust the Penn State offense. They have found ways to score in multiple different ways through multiple avenues with different players throughout the season. It's not just the creativity of Andy Kotelnicki. It's that Drew Aller, the trigger man, has been really good. Now, have they blown anybody out? They have not blown anybody out really in a way that the scoreboard and the maybe some of the politicking you used to have to do in the BCS or in the 14 playoff where you would have to get that big score over an inferior opponent. They've just found a way to make the other team irrelevant in the game through a lot of what they've done on offense. So when they get hot, and I think they can get hot in this game, they're going to put up some points. Drew Aller can get hot. Nick Singleton can get hot in this game. But I do think USC is going to move the football, and it's going to feel different maybe than some of the other games. But a big benefit to Penn State, we just found out the availability report. Again, go to bluewhiteillustrated.com for the full thing. Anthony Donko is not questionable. He's not even on the availability report. So how much does that do for the offense?
It does a lot. I think that's exciting. I mean, I even said on my show after watching Anthony Donka, and I've said this before, I don't share any information I get because obviously a lot of these guys are still my friends. Yeah. I saw it and I said, his shoulder slipped out. It's a ball socket joint and it came out.
The way he got hit, it was pretty obvious it was a shoulder. We're not speculating on that. He was holding his shoulder.
Yeah, and so, I've had that happen to me many times, and majority of the time it takes a little bit more than a week to get back because it has to heal. Doesn't seem that way for Anthony Donka. He's ready to go. I'd be remiss in my duties if I didn't say it is a lot easier for it to slip back out. Your shoulder, when it comes out once, it'll come out again. But he will have a harness on his arm trying to keep that safe. So having him at right tackle, as I mentioned earlier, I think is definitely a big thing, especially if you were trying to pass against a USC defense that does not have a good pass rush. You have that right tackle spot sealed up with Donka.
Yeah.
Let's see what Drew Aller can put together for this Penn State offense.
Either way, I do think that Nolan Rucci is going to play in this game because it's something that they have done already this year. And if he's coming into the game and you're not sure if he's 100%, maybe he's 90%, he's good enough to play, but is he good enough to play at the level to give you that domination block that he's able to do? Or if you just want to take some reps off of him, they've wanted to play Nolan Rucci a lot this year, and they've been able to do that at times. So I do think we'll see him at some point in this game. I'm with you. I'm still a little skeptical of like how healthy is he, but to have both him and Nick Singleton on the field provides a massive advantage in the run game and something where it could lead to a snowball for Penn State to put up score early and often and make this one how Penn State fans want to feel. A 3-2 team, unranked, wipe the board, move on to the next game, move on to your bye week, and then, of course, the sight's set on Ohio State down the road with other games there on the road. We'll be back more after this. The Penn State pregame show coming up next on 99.5 The Bus. Thank you for tuning in to the Tailgate Show.